Welcome to this episode of the Context Podcast by Geist. I'm your host, Martha Zink, and this is where we get to talk about whatever is going on in the FileMaker community. This is a special episode with a special guest. We were lucky enough to have Rick Kalman from Claris join us to talk about the newest version of FileMaker, fresh with a new icon and name. All right, today I am joined by Rick Kalman from Claris, as well as Todd Geist from Geist. And while Rick is always invited to come hang out, I feel like maybe he's here for a good reason. So, Rick, do you want to tell us why you came to hang out with us?
Yeah, I'm here to talk about a upcoming sort of major release of FileMaker, and so I thought this would be a good place to stop by and talk about that. I will start out by saying that one of the things that will be noticed when we ship the next version, not too much in the distant future, that it's got a new naming convention and a brand new spanking icon in order to draw your attention to it's a new, but we're going to call it FileMaker 2023. And if you have a question why we're doing that, we felt that, it's been about 3 years in this May that we have been on the 19, what we refer internally to the 19.x releases. And there's been quite a few of them, in fact, almost 3 years worth of releases. We release about 3 or 4 times a year now in a very different fashion than we did when we did monolithic annual releases. And we felt that this better reflected sort of the nature of how we release software these days, and we would go to a year. Doesn't mean for sure that, January 1 of 2024, all of a sudden we're shooting out a FileMaker or a Claris 2024, but it'll give us a sense of the freshness of the releases better than, 3 years of 19 dots and having to keep track of that.
Very cool. Yeah, I like that. I like that term, freshness. That's good. Go ahead, Todd.
I was just going to say, I think it's impressive and really worth leaning on because of, I think, all the different things that are happening with Claris and the different, studio and the new Claris line of products that I don't think there's been a 3-year period where you've released as many new things on the FileMaker, what was the FileMaker platform ever. So, for those who are concerned about, anything happening with FileMaker development work slowing down, I think it's obvious that you can rest assured, because if anything, it's speeded up pretty dramatically. I mean, we had those point releases through 19.6. That's, those were all of them were pretty big releases, lots of new features. And this new one is it's just got tons of new features, all kinds of new stuff across the entire platform. So, it just seems like things are really cranking in terms of how quickly you guys are putting out new features.
Yeah, well, moving to Agile, as we did a few years ago, really helped that, because before, even if we did annual releases, I would begin planning around about the DevCon or Engage time. And so there was in an annual release cycle, there was about an 18-month advanced planning cycle, which meant you pretty much had to have an idea of what you were going to do for the next 18 months. And the world just moves way too fast for that. And so even that annual, which was much faster than we had gone before, was not serving us well. And what it allowed us to do is to much more closely work directly with developers and
customers,
if you will, to address some things immediately. So rather than a year and a half, and if it didn't hit a cycle, it could be 3 years or more before it would show up. And now it can be a matter of months, and also continuing to add value to the product along the way rather than saving it all up. And it also allows us to come back on things that we did that, we would launch something and you'd have to wait another year, potentially, if it wasn't a bug, in order to enhance it. And now we can just continually polish these things along the way, because they always need polish, especially if they're significant.
Yeah. So God, there's just so much here. Where do you want to begin?
Well, I think first I want to say a little bit about this release and who the primary focus of this release is. And if I look at it in total, it's clearly focused on the professional developer. And what we mean by that is somebody who makes their entire living, or at least a decent portion of their living, developing FileMaker. A lot of our developers these days do more than just FileMaker development. That just makes sense, and especially their consultancy and the kinds of services to provide their customers. But this is squarely focused on that person. It's not on the new person trying to learn the product. It's for people who make their living off of this. And so that's the first point. But as Todd sort of alluded to, we've made pretty significant enhancements in this release since 19.6 to reliability, to performance, to scalability, to security, and reliability. And one of the reasons we're able to do that is we have gone after, yes, in the 19 time frame, the 19.x releases, 19.1 all the way to 19.6, and now this one, we've gone after those things that were causing, say, a server to not be stable or not be performant, and things that you just come to rely on. I mean, I'm a big fan that server should be utterly boring. You should never have to think about server, or almost never have to think about server, because it just does what it's supposed to do, and it just stays up and it's performant. Ironically, moving away from waterfall to agile has allowed us to work much more closely with customers who have particular issues around these areas, directly with our engineers. And they get special builds even before they go to ETS to see if this is addressing the problem, with a theory that if this person is having that problem, many others are having the same problem. So it's been an era of taking an opportunity to address some of these things that would undermine, say, the confidence someone would have if a server goes down, especially when it's business critical. And a lot of our customers obviously are doing things business critical to them, with our platform. So it's our obligation to have that thing be stable and performant.
Well, like I said, there's a lot here. I've got my notes typed out. See, it's a whole page, and the type is so tiny, I couldn't fit it on. It's like 0.9 or whatever, 9, font size 9, just so I could fit the whole thing on here. I mean, there's stuff on FileMaker Go, there's stuff on server, there's stuff on Pro. God, I don't know. Why don't we start with some of the scalability stuff that server's getting?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things here. One, if you are using WebDirect for deployment, and one of the nice things about, it's a rich web client based on what you build with FileMaker, but it really helps with deployment rather than having to install fat bits on desktops and that sort of thing. But one of the things that we always deal with there, it's obviously a WAN environment versus a LAN environment. So performance in the way that you build your solutions on WebDirect is needs to be taken into consideration, but also scaling beyond 100 or 500. So with this release, we are able now to scale out with the Linux server to 1,000 WebDirect connections. If you use a single machine in your Mac and Windows, you can scale out to 500 with secondary machines. With Linux, you can scale out for any individual machine, 100 Mac and Windows, but on Linux, 120. Also on Linux, because we leverage only on Linux Nginx, we're able to use and leverage that to go out to 10 machines, which would give you 1,000 connections. On top of that, the admin console for FileMaker 2023 for server will have a UI in there to be able to put in where your secondary machines are when you're doing that load balancing. So we just make it easier to do that as well, so you don't have to rely on the command line.
WebDirect is a big deal. We have lots of customers on our hosting platform that are doing SaaS-based businesses and things like that, and they rely on WebDirect. It's absolutely essential for them to be able to deliver these solutions to their customers. So I'm sure they're going to be thrilled with this impressive bump in scalability there.
Yep. And sort of related to that, another thing that we did is for at least since FileMaker 7, if not before that, I can't remember before that, but we have had a limit of 125 files, and now it's 256. So more than doubled that. So depending upon what your use cases are, and especially if you're doing things like hosting and that sort of thing, or you've got your SBA solution that you're providing for, there's a lot more files that can be accommodated for before you'd have to put in another server as well.
Yeah, I think that 125 goes back at least to FileMaker 3. That's what I remember.
Why it wasn't 128, because we got a good 256. It's supposed to follow that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's weird. That's interesting. I don't know what the reason was, but yeah. So that's great. Double the number of files. What's next on your favorites list?
It is worth mentioning around security. A lot of places where we use SSL, we've now moved to OpenSSL 3.0. And what you may not be aware of is during 19.6, for our cloud properties, which would essentially be FileMaker Cloud as well as Connect, we received SOC 2 Type 2 and iOS and ISO compliance certifications as well. And it actually represents the first time that and we partnered with Apple because they provide a lot of the monitoring of our cloud, and that was a first time for them as well. So it was a pretty good achievement. So the combination of that, security is something that people don't like to think about, but when it bites you bad, right? So we're constantly keeping an eye on that. I don't usually think of it as features as much as just, sort of table stakes for being a good citizen of, deployed critical solutions.
Yep. So OpenSSL 3, another little one in that area. You can do send mail using OAuth 2, which is nice because a lot of providers are actually stopping basic auth as a way to do authentication with SMTP.
Yeah, that one's pretty neat because there's some new UI affordance in the send mail setup dialog. And of course, that's available from the file menu. You can do directly, but also in scripting. And now you can select something, it'll be called OAuth 2, and it allows you to leverage your credentials if you're using Microsoft 365 Business or Google Workspace subscriptions. Then you can use your credentials for that, and so you'll see those two options pop up when you select that from the dialog in either direction there.
Small, that's a really exciting one. Yeah, I can't think of a solution where we aren't sending emails. So, the idea of being able to have that built in is pretty exciting. I think a lot of our customers are going to need that right away.
Yeah.
Well, one of the ones that I've been exploring a little bit, and we've got some plans for, is under data reliability, or we can call it audit logging, but this ability to get notified when data has changed in the system and do something with that data. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that one's pretty neat. I sort of think of it as it's complementary to what we did in 19.6 with the transactions that we introduced. And I know that your last podcast even was focused on that. But this is complementary, and sometimes people think that they're they're a continuation because we've introduced a new script trigger called on window transaction. And so they
Right.
associate with transactions. I just call them complementary. But when you
Yeah.
use that, in fact, it's probably worth going into a little bit more detail here. Let me tell you how this thing functions. So in the file options dialog, of course, are the Windows-based script triggers, and they've been there since we introduced script triggers. There's a new one now. It's called on window transaction, and when that is set up, it provides a method for logging every create, update, and delete database interaction. And what we've done is we've hooked it in to FileMaker's window-based transaction system that we already have, and when FileMaker creates, edits, or deletes records, it returns information on those changes, and it does that by generating a JSON file. And so one of the things I want to let you know is when we launch this very soon, there will be an engineering blog associated with this as well that will give some examples of this in use. But this trigger passes JSON parameters and captured by a get script parameter function in the script that you're calling, right? And so that trigger captures information if your records are created, if records are updated, if they're deleted, or if multiple records are updated or multiple records are deleted. It'll generate a JSON audit log file if one doesn't already exist, and it'll append to one if it already exists, and it will be in the documents folder by default. I'm not sure if it can be moved, but it'll be there by default. And when a window transaction completes, this JSON file, what it does is it captures the file name, the base table name, the record ID, the operation, and the contents of that file are all of the operations that were part of the completed transaction. So it just logs everything. It comes with not only that new script trigger, which can be used in browser find mode. Okay, it is compatible across Pro, Go, WebDirect, Server, Cloud, DAPI, and custom web publishing. So essentially
Wow.
everywhere, right? So it's got
Yeah.
compatibility everywhere. It also is complemented by three new functions. The get base table names returns the base table names of a field reference, right? And also, this is get base table names. There is also base table names that returns a list of all of the tables, names of the tables in the file, and then base table IDs are the ID for those. And those are leveraged when you're creating that log to be
Right.
able to track changes. So the combo of those. And so I think when you look at that 1-2 punch of script transactions in 19.6 and now audit logging in FileMaker 2023, then I think that those are tools that professional developers are going to be able to take advantage of. I was listening earlier to how you guys were riffing on the kinds of things you could do or no longer had to do because of the introduction of script transactions. So I think we'll see
Yeah.
similar things with this.
Yeah. I'm like, we've had this use case for a long, obviously, well, forever, but we've had things we could kind of do to work around some of these things. Um, we did like for our GoZync product that we had for many years where we're syncing mobile to server, or in LedgerLink when we're syncing to QuickBooks. We could track anytime a record was created or edited, and then we would like flip a bit, flip a field from true to false with an auto enter calc. But then we would have to go find all those records, and then we would have to loop through them, creating the JSON objects or whatever it was that we needed to create, and then send them off to wherever they needed to go. And we couldn't do deletes. Couldn't do it. There just isn't a way. There wasn't a way to know when a record was deleted. So that
That
was
was
the
the
best
fake
we could
delete,
do.
right?
What's that?
Remember, you would fake delete a record. You would delete
That's
the
right.
record and like hide it from the found set and flag it, and then the
Yep.
script would run off and go do the rest of the work, right? You'd always have to like pretend it was deleted until you could actually document whatever you needed. I remember
Yep.
those days well.
Yep. It's a massive bunch of workarounds. The other thing that I think is super important here when we think about, we talk about modern FileMaker a lot. And one of the things about our approach there is that smaller apps working together as opposed to one big giant app. And so now we have a way for two apps to kind of communicate without being directly interacted, without being directly connected, because one app can send all of its changes to the other pretty easily. I mean, it's a reasonable thing to do now, whereas that would have been that's much harder to do, prior to this. So this is going to have a very big impact.
Yeah. Hey, Todd, there are some additional things I would like to say about what we've done with WebDirect because of its importance
Sure.
for
Yeah.
deployment and beyond just the ability to scale it further. There and collectively, I think you'll get the sense of how we're trying to bring this forward because each one of them individually, you think, well, okay, but together. So let me just tell you, we've updated the Java that it's using to Java 17. We've updated Vaadin, which is the underlying framework we use to be able to do what we're doing with WebDirect, pretty significantly up to 8.18.0. We also did some work to be able to address ghost memory from disconnected users, ghost users, and they don't release, and eventually you run out of RAM or whatever, and it's just not good for the system. We've done some work, most of it in 19.6, but I think continuing in 2023. On things like scrolling of list views so that they don't flash, and also done some work to optimize the CSS behind the scenes so that we're being much more optimal generating it, which gives us speed. So we're continuing to invest in that. In fact, one of the things I want to say is we will continue to do similar enhancements and invest in the FileMaker platform until everyone can move to the new Claris platform because we've removed the existing barriers and make it a little bit too cumbersome to move over now, or every use case that they currently rely on can be solved with the new platform. Until then, we will continue to invest in FileMaker. On top of that, the reality is FileMaker Pro is Claris Pro. With Claris Pro just having a few additional things like the ability to communicate in a bidirectional fashion with Studio. But that is the base, and we'll continue to develop that way. So for anyone concerned that we're going to remove your ability to make a living off of FileMaker, we're not that crazy. Let's just put it that way. We know what we're sitting on. We know what the product is. We have been iterating on it for over 35 years, right? Yeah. So it's something to be built on top of. That's how we see that. I'm just here letting people know we got you covered.
Well, the last few releases have had quite a bit of WebDirect work, and obviously getting a lot of attention. And that's great to see because it is a very useful deployment pattern. Lots of businesses need it. There are many businesses that simply won't install apps, inside their network. They just won't do it.
Yeah.
So being able to use WebDirect is just huge, and seeing these these are big improvements. I mean, I maintain large software code bases, and jumping Java versions and Vaadin versions is a lot of work. It's not like you just say I want to use the new version. You have to go through and make sure that all this stuff is still compatible. The code that you've written before has to be compatible. And sometimes there are changes, just like we get, very rarely, but we do occasionally get changes in the FileMaker code. It happens a lot more when you're going, shifting Java versions or shifting a framework version like Vaadin. So
there's a lot. There's a lot of complexity behind the scenes on what we do when we generate. Think about, in a way, it's magical. Right? I create something in FileMaker Pro and it projects it faithfully as a web app in a browser without me doing anything, right? And for the most part, that's true. It's an incredible technology, but behind the scenes, man, is it utterly complex.
It is.
Because we have to translate things between Java and between, the Draco model and so on, and then pipe it back the other direction and so on. And,
Yeah.
I'm always amazed that, how these things, they work, right? Thank God light travels fast. Let's just put
That's right. We haven't reached the limits of that yet.
Yeah.
Once we go interplanetary, we'll have some other issues. But for now,
talk about WAN performance then.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so that was WebDirect, transactions. So a bunch of new stuff that's sort of in the bucket of deployment. You want to get into some of those?
Yeah, I think the top of that list is we are introducing Ubuntu 22 LTS, and it will support both the Intel chips like it does now, but also introducing support for ARM processors. And so that's a big deal in a number of things. One, it opens up the number of places that we can deploy. It allows us to take advantage of things like the Apple Silicon M1 chip, and also it is more economic for those people who are providing hosting services on those as well. So a lot of good advancements there. Makes it easier or better for Docker support. And we will, at this release, also, I think, have a blog and a script on using Ubuntu with Docker, so it'll make that a little bit easier. That's the direction. We want to make this stuff brain dead simple to deploy a server, especially in Linux, because not everyone is versed in the world of Linux.
Right. We've noticed that the ARM chips are markedly faster for server. I mean, it's a significant boost. It depends on what you're doing and all those things, but there's no question that it's faster and significantly faster for the same, hosting dollar, if you will. You get more performance out of it. So that's pretty impressive. And Ubuntu, we've been using it. We've been using that a lot. It's become our standard deployment is now Linux. And in some ways, like if you haven't done it, it's definitely a little challenging because you're going through SSH, you're doing terminal, and you may not have a UI installed. But on the other hand, you've got maybe SFT upload, and you've got a few terminal commands, and that's all you need to do. So there's no UI, there's no way for things to get lost. Everything is always in the same place, it's always in the same directory. So in some ways, it's simpler. I mean, I know it's new and different for people who haven't tried it, but it is, I think, less in terms of the stuff you have to deal with around maintaining a normal server like Windows or Mac, where you've got UIs that have to get updated and all this other stuff that gets in the way of that. These are much slimmer, simpler machines in the long run.
Yeah. The other things in the area of deployment that are worth mentioning, I did already mention that the server admin console will have some UI to be able to point to where your secondary machines are for using the Nginx on Linux. Also worth noting is the server admin console as well as data API have both been upgraded to use Node.js 18. There's a new ability to receive a notification when a server-side script finishes running on server with a callback script option. I think that also is a sleeper for the kinds of things that allows you to do. Also, that the admin console will now provide notification when a consistency check fails on a database. And how many of us have run into customers who have 2 weeks of backups and every one of them is bad, right? And because they had no idea, right, that was there. So this should help in that fashion. Another nice touch is that on the Windows Server, when you uninstall, now we'll retain your file configuration, your setup for server, and you can apply that on the new server installation. So that's been there for a while at 19, But when you uninstall the Windows Server, that stuff sort of got blown away. So we'll retain that, and that's been a real. It's made a huge difference for people in deploying a new server. One of the reasons people would take so long to upgrade, besides waiting to see, are there going to be any bugs before the 1.0 for the next VREV,
Right.
is okay. It's mission critical. I got to get lucky and find a Friday. And then hope to God I get my server back up by Monday, because I got to put all this stuff in and test it. And now it is and I got to reset all the settings and all that kind of stuff. And now it's just so much easier to move between
Now,
servers.
was that always the case on Mac and Linux? Does it do that, or is it no? So
Now,
it's
it was
only on
something we
Windows. It's just
introduced. Yeah, yeah. Now, see,
okay.
yeah, the uninstaller sort of, if in the Windows world, uninstallers are very odd to, the Mac world, where you just drag it in the trash can and empty it,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't quite work that way, because the registry, it's doing all sorts of stuff and
Yeah.
putting stuff different places.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Excellent. Some more buckets. How about integration?
Yeah, so there's this is interesting. So one of the things that we talk about and I like to talk about, because sometimes there's confusion on what is the Claris platform and what is the FileMaker platform, right? And the way to think about what the Claris platform, the FileMaker platform is, the Claris platform is the FileMaker platform at the foundation, with the addition of bringing in Claris Connect into the platform, and then introducing something called Claris Studio, right? And if you think about Claris Studio, it's our new modern web-based app experience, right? Allows web forms, web applications to be built. It uses a modern framework, so that depending on the device size, it flows as needed, so you don't have to create special layouts for everything. It's using MongoDB on the back end, which is a NoSQL database. And so it's a brand new technology stack for the future. And so we've introduced that. Initially people are doing things like anonymous public facing forms. And as we build out more and more use cases, that platform, is the future of the platform. But at this point, people haven't been able to move all the way over to that, right? So, but we're calling the FileMaker 2023 release also a stepping stone release to the Claris platform. And here's the reason why. When we launch FileMaker 2023, we will make the developer tier of Claris Connect free to everybody. It'll just be open now, right? And we're introducing a new script step in FileMaker Pro that'll allow you to call a Claris Connect flow. And you put in the webhook API key and tell it which field you want to act upon. And that's step one. We've got some behind that eventually, where we'll just be able to look at the Connect catalog and you choose the flow. And then we've got some ideas beyond that of how to enhance it. So what we're doing is we're bringing Claris Connect into the FileMaker platform. We're also bringing Claris Connect into the Claris platform. So, for instance, it will eventually disappear as a separate thing and a separate product, and what it will be is just part of the platform. It'll make it easier to connect to other external systems that people have a tendency to connect to these days, because FileMaker is not an island and it hasn't been for quite some time. Which also reminds me, it is worth noting this. I was taking a look at, one of the things we talk about is that in the 19 timeframe, we have also, and it maybe hasn't even been that noticeable. I'm sure it has been to you, Todd, and Martha, but we have significantly opened the platform. And I was looking at, okay, so what did we do, right? Okay, well, we allowed you to run JavaScript in a web viewer. We added the JavaScript add-ons. We've enhanced JSON. We've enhanced curl. In fact, in 2025, we now support in curl the secure FTP. We've continued to enhance REST and OData, and it gets some enhancements in 2023 as well. The admin API. On top of that, we've given you access to Core ML, first starting on iOS devices and now on Mac devices as well. Opened up to OAuth for external authentication. Introduced Save as XML for serializing and deserializing, and et cetera. So there was a time where FileMaker was relatively closed. And then we just changed our philosophy and said, no, let's open it up as much as possible and allow everyone who can enhance it to enhance it, right? And so while that stuff sort of trickled in and trickled in and trickled in, the ability to just about attach and talk to anything out there, and then that doesn't even count the fact that you had the FMP URL to do all sorts of things with. So I think that's totally changed the nature of the game for FileMaker, in the last few releases.
Yeah, and these features begin to pile up on each other and begin to work in combination in ways that get extremely powerful. So, for example, on window transaction, you can run this new script step to call a connect flow, which means that anytime a contact record in your contact database gets changed, you can send it to connect, which could send it to whatever CRM system or other system that you've integrated with Claris Connect. And what used to be quite complex is now just, tying together two native features of the platform that, are just there. So now you can take something that was a lot of work and it becomes pretty easy. And this ability to pass data around like this, it's pretty critical, as we've been saying. I mean, we've been harping on this for a number of years now about not being an island and integration, and every company has many, many apps that they're working with. And so these kinds of things begin to pile up. We have JSON. Like, you couldn't do this kind of integration without JSON. You couldn't do it without insert from URL. Now we can go right to connect with every change that comes out of our database or out of a particular layout in a particular table in our database, which is pretty hot.
Yeah. Believe it or not, Todd, we actually have been listening to you for a number of years. You've had a lot of great ideas. So
I know.
You're a thought leader.
So. I know you guys listen. And I know you're listening all the time, and not just to me. You listen to a lot of people. I see some of these things coming in, and I had no idea they were thinking about that. Well, somebody else probably brought that to you. So yeah, it's great. It's great to see that opening up. It's great to see the listening, and there's just so much we can do now, and still be FileMaker can still be that core piece, of what you do.
I think of a lot of the sales meetings that we have where people ask about FileMaker and where it fits in their grander picture of their IT tech and the things that they're thinking about. And throughout the past few years, especially, it's such a clear, it has its place, right? It has its place. It's going to play nice with these other things. We're going to be able to talk to other systems. It doesn't feel guarded, right? It feels like an addition to the tool. And I enjoy being able to have those conversations. It feels right for everybody, really. So it's exciting to be able to keep moving it forward this way.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I really don't lose track of, and because it really is a competitive advantage for us, and especially as we look at our top competitors, is just the sheer ubiquitousness of where you can deploy, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think about, I can deploy on premise, I can deploy in the cloud. It can be my cloud, it can be our cloud, right? We don't care, right? And you can deploy in a browser, you can deploy in an iOS device, you can deploy in a mobile device, right? You can deploy on Mac, on Windows. Your servers can be Mac and Windows and Linux, or you can serve in the cloud, and you can be online, offline, hybrid. None of our competitors have that sheer ability to, no matter what the use case, we can cover you, right? So for most of our competitors, it's like the cloud or nothing, right? And if your internet connection's down, you got nothing, right? And it's just, you can do that, but you can mix and match, you can choose that. So it's this whole thought of never having to say no, right? And I think we need to hold on to that. The very fact that, it's still magic that I can build a file on Mac or Windows and it doesn't care where I deploy it, Mac or Windows browser, iOS device. It doesn't care, right? And yet I've built the same file. Maybe I have to take in a few considerations of Windows versus Mac, but not too many, right?
That's right.
And no one does that. And I think it would be a loss if we forgot that helps people say yes to our platform because they can't find anything else that does that.
It's a big deal. The on-prem thing is real. It's not going away for for some number. It's hard to know what the number is, but we talk to a lot of customers who simply aren't putting their data outside their control. It's not happening. And there are good reasons for that because of the sensitivity of their data, or they're just, very, very security conscious and they don't want to lose control of it. And those are good reasons. And we have to support customers in all of those cases. In fact, with our hosting platform, we support SBA partners that have a mix. They have some customers who run in the cloud and some have to be on-prem. That's just the way it is. That's not changing anytime soon.
No. I remember as we were evolving FileMaker Go, and Todd, you were working with us on, I think, Reconnect. And one of the statements you made, and that was a number of years ago, you made the statement that the more ubiquitous the internet becomes, the more critical offline becomes. Because when you don't have it is when you need it, right? And so while you may have it more and more often, how do you have continuity when, and we have plenty of use cases where, someone's diving in a cave out in the middle of the desert in Mexico or out in the middle of or in a boat, right, and off the coast of Africa with no internet connection, and yet they can still operate offline. They can sync back if they need to, and FileMaker gives them the piece parts to be able to pull that off, right? And so I think it's the sheer number of use cases that you can cover it at is someone can come and at the bottom of this all is that if you have a specific business problem you're trying to solve and you're motivated to solve it, you can pick up our tool and you can solve it pretty much to a T. When you have someone who's talking at DevCon or Engage as an expert that some of them are sitting right here in this room, and started out with some expertise in some specific field, be it chemistry or law or medicine or whatnot, was not afraid of technology, picked up our tool, solved their problem with it, and found out they were good at it and they liked it and ended up making a career out of this. It's happened over and over and over again. There is a there. On top of that, we have finally come to realize that this platform should be for professional developers who know how to make it sing. And while we always aspire to make it easier and easier to approach, it's got a learning curve because it's very powerful. And some things that are powerful have a learning curve. It's what you can do once you get past that aha moment is what can't you do, right? And it's just that kind of a versatile tool. And I think that's why a lot of us, over all these years, still love this thing, right? And myself included. I mean, I was a developer when I started. And to this day, 22 years now at FileMaker and 25 plus years as a FileMaker developer, all in total, I still love it. And everything's not like that, right? So I feel lucky to enjoy what I'm doing and make a living at it.
Yeah. That story sounds strangely familiar to me.
Yeah.
There is one, I think, a little feature, but interesting one in the integration, which is read QR codes. And QR codes have been around for a long time, but during the pandemic, they really picked up because now all this contactless stuff people wanted to do, right? And you go into a restaurant, you hit the QR code and you look at the menu. It makes so much sense, right? It took the the horribleness of the pandemic to push QR codes into pretty much everywhere now. I mean, they're just all over the place, and so we could do this on Go for years actually.
Yep.
10 years, maybe, I think.
Yep.
And now we got it across platform, which is awesome. That's going to make really powerful but simple solutions easier to do.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We got it first on the hardware for iOS. It's sort of a natural because it's got a camera, right? And it gives you the ability to be able to scan. And then they brought it to the Mac operating system. But what we've done now, of course, we didn't have it on Windows nor Linux, and now we've extended it to Windows and Linux as well. And so then it becomes truly something you can use across the platform.
Yeah. Now, does this? I'm trying to remember. Is this run on server side as well, given a container image, or is it?
I'm trying to look. Yeah, I'm thinking it must, but to tell you the truth, I don't know off the top of my head. But because of where we ported it to, I'm just looking at my
Linux.
notes
I mean,
here.
it would have to be.
Windows and Linux. Yeah, because we don't have a
to
Linux client, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it would have to be. So yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome because QR codes are. I mean, they're just great. We had a number of years ago. I joined a startup where we were doing kids photographs and sports photographs, and the order forms were paper. The parents would fill them out on site, and then they would take a picture holding up the order form, and on the order form was a QR code. And when we took the picture, I had to write a whole bunch of like crazy code and actually Java to like find the QR code in the page, clip it out, and then scan it and do it. It was all Java. I didn't really know what I was doing. We're able to pull it off, but it took a lot of work. But it was really powerful. It connected the dots in that workflow in a way that you're at a sports league, you have 500 kids trying to get their picture taken. Like you need something simple, low tech that's going to work every time. The QR codes are that. They work really well for that. And especially now that this was before everybody had a camera, and now everybody's got a camera. So this is just great.
Worth noting, because there's so much of it, it barely gets noticed, but we have literally addressed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bugs, and we do that every single incremental release. But the typically what we look at is I always prioritize the customer impacting bugs, right? And so we try, because those are quality of life things, right? So probably in the 19 timeframe, from 19.1 to 19.6, well into the thousands, right? And well, it sounds like a lot when something is as vast as the FileMaker platform with 37 years of iteration on code, there's bugs, right? Yeah. Every software, it used to be a software engineer here who said that it's been proven mathematically that it's not possible to have any software of significance to be bug-free. Which always makes me pause is, am I going to let my Tesla drive itself for me? Not until there's no possibility of any bug.
Yeah, I think that really goes, what's the word I'm looking for? Unheralded in some way, because the thing about bug fixing is that each individual bug probably doesn't impact a huge number of people, or it would have been fixed, right, a long time ago. And so, if you listed them all, most of them would matter nothing to most of the people because they wouldn't have ever hit them. But for the people who have hit them or have struggled to work around them because of the particular characteristics of their system, getting those addressed is massive. And to be able just to keep knocking those off at such a high rate is super important. Because, like you said, you're building all this new stuff. You're probably going to add some bugs too. There'll be some new bugs in there that have to get fixed in the next rounds. It's just what it has to be. So having this be a part of your agile process where not only are you adding new features at just a really unprecedented clip, you're also knocking off all of these bugs. So, it's awesome. It's getting like, I don't know. I keep talking to people about do you guys, it seems like people are, I don't know what the word is, but they're the amount of new stuff that's coming is so huge that has been delivered and continues to be delivered is so huge. And I just think about, years ago, a decade or longer, when we would, something would get a new version and it would be 3 years before we got anything reasonably new. We would go a decade without anything new in the UI at all. Right? Like, so I mean, this is just massive change, and it's so important to keep the platform up to date and moving forward in today's world, because things
Yeah.
are not standing still. It's only speeding up.
Yep.
We have to do it. So I just want to say, thanks and really congratulations on being able to just turn up the velocity on new releases and new impactful features, because it's really amazing, and it's really helping. It matters to people. It matters to us. It matters to our customers. It makes our lives easier. It makes their lives easier, and it ends up helping their businesses or their organizations in meaningful ways. So we need it. So keep it up.
Well,
What's coming next? What's in 2024?
Oh, we got some ideas up our sleeve. We got all these people behind the scenes thinking all the time. But, hey, thank you so much for helping us get the word out about this. I think one of the things that we had become concerned about, and one of the reasons that we got the new icon and the new naming convention, is that unless you were paying very, very, I mean, our best customers are keeping up with us all the time, right? Because they know the value. But if you weren't paying close attention, you may have mistook the fact that we're still on 19 in that, it was still 19.1, or maybe you hung out in the earlier versions and you didn't realize what we were doing. So we wanted to send a signal. To pay attention, even if you're on earlier 19, we've significantly moved it forward. But we also realized that it was getting long in the tooth. 3 years with a one version number, we have never done that, never. And people are used to, imagine people who are, say, a version or two behind that think they're fairly current, don't realize, when they get on the community, someone says, well, actually you're like 5 or 6 versions behind because in 19 they did this, and they just didn't know that we advanced this platform. If you're sitting on 17 or 18 and now you look at 2023, it's a pretty big distance, right? Same underlying skills that you have are going to work. It's just a lot more capabilities, a lot more versatility, a lot more ability to integrate and deploy. So.
And what we should say that no file format change here either. So, the upgrade process is pretty seamless. I'm not aware of any major behavior changes in anything. Like it's backwards compatible. There've been a few since 12, but not many. Like it's been a couple things here or there, but really it continues to work the way that it worked before. You just get a whole bunch of new features, and that's awesome. That's what we need, because part of the problem with this new world that we live in is things change so much. If you're having to maintain it's kind of almost an exponential problem that can creep up on you. If you have a bunch of things that are all changing at a rapid rate and they interconnect, of course, the changes between those interconnection points are changing at an exponential difference, right? But this is changing this, so these things can really, really get out of sync pretty quickly. So having some core technologies that are moving forward, but also carefully maintaining backwards compatibility is pretty important. Like I think of some of the most successful platforms in the world. WordPress is one of the ones that pops to mind. Backwards compatibility since the first version. It's amazing. And it really matters. People can upgrade their website without worrying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think they learned that lesson when we put the web viewer object in 8.5. There was some concern that the built-in sort of links were fragile. They have never broken. But of course, if Google broke the backwards compatibility the internet would come down, right? It's just they couldn't do that, right? So they didn't, and we've very, very seldom. Maybe I think we might have to go in and change something with the MapQuest or something like that. But I was even surprised how long that stayed, but it makes sense, right? You just don't break stuff that works.
That's right.
Sort of a first do no harm. I think someone's got that oath. At least they used to.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on a major release. And I don't know, this podcast may be out probably around the same time it's available. So if you're listening to it, check it out. It's probably out.
Yeah, you can always go to our website at claris.com, and you'll see a new website ready to receive you as well once we launch. So it'll
Awesome.
be hard to miss.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you for coming and enlightening us with all this new stuff we're going to get. I think this is exciting. It's obviously more topics for us to talk about on the Context podcast. I know I'm sure Todd will have lots of new cool tricks he'll want to tell us about all these new features you've given us. But I think this is spot on, that this is definitely a developer version that's really going to help out our customers, and we're going to be able to provide a lot. I feel the modernization, the continuous supports it's good stuff. So yeah, we look forward to talking more and learning about all the new versions. And like Todd already said, what's next is the next question. So we can't wait to have you back and hear about that more.
All right.
Yeah, we'll have you back real soon.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Martha. Thank you, Todd. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Just as a reminder, this is available on YouTube and as a podcast, and make sure you check out the show notes, as there are a lot of links to share there. If you can take a minute to pause and subscribe, we'd really appreciate it, but better yet, if you can share it with a friend, that would be pretty awesome. No matter what your role is in this community, you're proof of how amazing this Claris community really is. My job is to help spread your knowledge and your stories on the podcast. Find me on Twitter at MZ123 or at ProofGeist, and let's share your story.